Did for Age-All last year, which we had lots of fun with. I've updated it in response to some of the questions which happened during last year's session. And I'm hoping to build in also some examples to provide of what exactly do we mean by predatory journals. So let's get started then. So I'm going to share some slides with you. Which, as custom dictates, is going to take me slightly longer than I expected. Even after all these years, it takes a while to actually bring slides up. Now, the big question now is, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Brilliant.
Yes, we can see the screen.
Yep.
Yes, we can see. We can see.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, we can see.
Thank you for the lively feedback. Right. So hopefully that's looking okay on the screen. Right. So let's move that out of the way. Right. So we're calling this presentation "Avoiding Predatory Publishers and Identifying Suitable Journals." What I always like to do when talking about this topic is to take the focus slightly away from this whole thing of fixating on what predatory journals are and directing it slightly more onto what is a good journal, what is a suitable journal for your research. But don't worry, we're still gonna try and define what we mean by predatory journals, because it's important, because this phrase is thrown around all over the place. So we need to know what it means, and we need to also be critical of the phrasing. So let's work out how to actually change slides. Here we go. Right, so me, very briefly about me. Some of you may know me from INASP and the project that was called AuthorAid, that's now called Rising Scholars. I am based in the United Kingdom, in Oxfordshire. My previous experience is with the publisher Taylor and Francis, which is just down the road from me, and also a program specialist, which I've misspelt, at INASP for 12 years. I was working in supporting researchers to publish their research. I'm a board member of the Open Access Journals Toolkit. It's changed slide. I'm actually, at the moment, I'm working as a coach and mentor to various individuals, professionals and academics. I'm also doing some research on coaching, on education and on artificial intelligence. So that's me, that's my background. I've always had an interest in journal publishing, in how researchers find the right journal. Having come from a publisher myself, sometimes it can be really confusing navigating all the different options you have as a researcher and academic, the confusing world of journal publishing and all the ethical pitfalls and challenges around it. So what I wanted to ask you first, and maybe you can put this in the chat box, anyone who'd like to answer this question, why is publishing in a journal important to you? What's so important about publishing in academic journals anyway? Why are we here today? So if you'd like to share in the chat box any of your thoughts about this. Why is publishing in a journal important to you? Any thoughts at all? Josephine, hi Josephine, I recognize your name. It makes my work accessible to others in the field. Yep, absolutely. So one of the key audiences that you're probably most interested in communicating to is other researchers in your field, or other stakeholders in your field of expertise. Anybody else? I'll go through the list on my screen then. Thank you. Is it Asnikech? To get promotion in academia, yes. That's often why publications are important. In fact, that was my top bullet points. It's an institutional requirement, or you might need it to get promotion. You might need your publications in high-ranking journals. And yeah, the second point, which backs up what Josephine said, which is reaching academic audiences, your peers. There's also, you want to get coverage as broad as possible, maybe even international coverage. Credibility is something, publishing in a journal means that your research becomes more credible, and also the prestige maybe of that journal. My slides have a timer on them, and I didn't realize, so apologies if they're moving around. I'll just have to talk quicker. So those are the things, the reasons why we often want to publish in a journal. And yes, as Maluli says, academic credibility of your work. Lots of reasons, and journals should cover all of those bases for you. So this session is going to be in the following format. This is the agenda, which is going to cover 4 main strategies for avoiding predatory publishing. So we're going to talk about the main strategies are: understand the different models of open access, only pay to publish if you really need to, know the journals in your field, and use well-known journal indexes as quality markers. So those are the main sort of 4 strategies we're going to talk about. At the end, we'll talk about related ethical issues as well, because a few questions about that came up in the past, in the last session, and also looking at some example journals as well to sort of discuss them live on screen if we have the time. And Busa says to increase the credibility of my institution as well. This is a good point. Right, so this terrifying image, which I got ChatGPT to generate this morning, apologies, that is quite scary. So we hear this expression, predatory journals, all over the place, and there was lots of criticisms of this. In the last session we did last year, people weren't necessarily happy with this. There was a question, isn't all commercial publishing predatory in some way? And so I think in a way, this scary picture kind of, I think what it's saying is that all publishing is scary. There are well-known publishers out there that make money out of researchers, out of institutions. And so we need to be aware that predatory has some very negative connotations, and let's also be sort of critical of the publishing landscape as well. But so I think we'll all agree we need fairer systems of publishing for everyone, a more equitable system which allows researchers all around the world to be able to get their research published at no or little cost. But we also need to be aware of bad publishing practices, and that's basically what predatory journals mean. So apologies for that scary picture. What we're going to do now is we're going to use Menti. So going to do a little icebreaker and then get your views on what you think about journal publishing, about predatory publishing. A nice, easy question to start with. So if you go to menti.com and type in that code, which is 43258824, you'll have a nice, easy question, which is, where are you based? So it looks like we've got 37 or so people in the room today. Oh, thank you, Kylie, for sharing the link. If you could go to menti.com, put in the code 43258824. I shall also do the same on my phone. United Arab Emirates, exciting, excellent. Kenya, South Africa, excellent. So they've updated Menti recently, so you can see that 3 of the 7 people on Menti so far have responded. Wait for a few more people to come in. That looks like more than 1 person is from Kenya because the words got bigger. By the way, during this Menti, you can actually navigate through all the questions. You can go ahead of us and answer future questions. South Africa has just got huge, so I would imagine we have quite a few people from South Africa, from the age-old team in particular. Oh, DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, excellent. South Africa, Free State, that's a bit more specific. Cape Town, even more specific. And Brazil, hello, it must be very early in Brazil. Nigeria, looks like I've got a couple of Nigerians that have suddenly joined in. Okay, so we're predominantly an African audience, but some other global representation as well. And if you can't use Menti, feel free to add in the chat. There's another Nigeria in the chat. Okay. And Ghana as well. Right, let's go to the next question. Some of you may have gone to already. Johannesburg. And another Nigeria in the chat box. Right, let's see if the next one's going to load for us. What is your research about? So try and be as brief as possible. I know some people have some very complicated research and research questions, but if you can summarize it in 1 or 2 words. Apologies that the connection is poor in Nigeria. I hope you can join along or watch the recording afterwards. So at the moment, we've got public health and entomology, plant breeding, AI, excellent. More than one person with an expertise in plant breeding. And as Kylie said, do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, especially if there's a chance of collaboration there for the 2 plant breeding people. Psychiatric care. Pockets of democracy. Very interesting. Finance. We got like more than 2 people who have an expertise in plant breeding. But DRC again, I'm not sure whether that's from the previous question or whether the research topic is actually DRC. Forestry. Okay, so we have a good diversity of different research topics coming in. I'll give time for one more. In the chat, Ali says energy economics. DRC is forestry. Thank you, Mbusa. And did one more just appear? Energy economics. Veterinary pathology in the chat. Archival science. Okay, excellent. That's a nice diversity we've got there of different topics. So hopefully this will be useful to us later on. We talk about the different types of journals, anthropology as well. Thank you, and law. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Right, next question then. Some of you might have gone ahead to this already. How experienced are you in publishing your research? So the first 2 people we've got somebody with no experience and somebody who's published more than 10 papers, and I'm calling that very experienced. And it's absolutely fine to have no experience at this stage. This is what this session is all about. We're just trying to give some really sort of foundational ideas on selecting the right journal, but also some really important points on identifying the right journal and some tips on how you can spot journals which maybe aren't right for you and might lead you down a dangerous path. So we're covering some basics, but it'd be also good to lean on some of the experience of those kind of publishing veterans that we might have here. I've got at least one anyway. 2, we've got 2, excellent. And Asmaketch in the chat box is also experienced. And Ali is experienced. I mean, I'm probably in the experienced, so I'm not very experienced. I don't have more than 10 publications in peer-reviewed journals. Josephine, you're experienced too. Excellent. Chukwu, you're experienced and still learning, aren't we all? I've got 3 very experienced people in the room. Excellent work. So we're going to lean on some of your tips in, I think, the next few Menti exercises. So a good range of levels of experience, and those who have no experience, hopefully this will be a really useful session for you. Right, what is your experience of predatory journals? I've heard of them, but no experience. I've received emails from them, but nothing else. I've been tempted to publish in them, or I published in a predatory journal. we're not going to be judgmental here. If you want to admit you've published in a predatory journal, it's also completely anonymous, so you can admit that. So, right, so it looks like the majority at the moment, you've heard of the expression, but you've got no experience of what it means. So that's absolutely fine. We'll be covering the basics in the session. Lots of people have received emails from them. It's good that you've kind of identified that those are less than credible journals from those emails. We've got at least one person who's been tempted, and those emails can be very tempting emails. They can use very colorful language to persuade you that your illustrious skills are needed for their high prestige academic journal, who they're going to distribute to a global audience. So it can be very tempting. Right, so we have less experience here of what these types of journals are. So let's talk about what do we mean by this expression. What is a predatory journal? And again, I'm aware that some people find this phrase quite problematic, but it's just a phrase that's well known in academia. We're going to use it as our reference point. What do we mean? I've defined it as it's a low quality publishing outlet. But what I mean by low quality is there's not much quality control. It's basically a website which puts your PDF on the website and packages it like a journal. So but it charges you a fee to do this, to upload your research to the internet. It doesn't provide the kind of professional services that you should expect from an academic or scientific journal. So it doesn't provide the services you would expect that you're paying for. So it's false advertising, in other words. Technically, it might not count as illegal as such, but it's definitely false advertising. So this phenomenon has emerged from the open access movement. So open access being the ability to access research papers from anywhere you are, for everyone, the public, practitioners, researchers, to be able to openly download research papers. And that's what the open access movement was all about. But unfortunately, there's been a side effect of this in that this has been commercialized by publishers, some of whom are reputable and some of whom aren't. So it is really important to understand the different models of open access. So unfortunately, as a researcher, you have to understand the slightly weird, slightly boring world of academic publishing at kind of a foundational level. And you may have seen these expressions on the right before, or you may not have. It can be really confusing. It's expression gold open access, green open access, hybrid open access. What do they all mean? So I've tried to simplify this on this one slide, and then we're going to go into each of these in order. What are your options as an author? First of all, you can publish in a subscription journal, and that is not open to the public, but it does not. You do not pay a fee to publish it. You can also publish in a subscription journal and pay a fee to that journal to make it open access. You can publish in one of these subscription journals and share a public version of your paper, which does not charge you anything. You can also publish in an open access journal, a commercial open access journal, in which you pay a fee. And you can also publish in a free open access journal where you pay no fee. So there are options where you pay and there are options where you don't pay. And this is the big problem with publishing at the moment. There's lots of confusion over payments, and there is a misconception, mostly a misconception, that as a researcher, as an author, you have to pay money to the publishers to publish your research paper, and this isn't always true. So you have journals which are closed, which we call subscription journals. We have journals which are open, which we call open access journals, and there are different options between them. And I'm going to run through these slides to explain them. but we can come back to this in the Q&A if you've got any confusion over this. So this is probably what most of us are very aware of. Quite often when we go to download a research paper, we hit a paywall. We can't download it. It's not open access. Now, if you are publishing in one of these journals, you don't actually pay a fee to publish your paper in a journal which is behind a paywall. It's actually free to you as an author, but it pays money. You pay money as the reader. And this is probably most, about 50%, maybe it's got a bit smaller, of all peer-reviewed research literature. It's behind a paywall, and it's very frustrating for most of us. But, and we'll come to this in a moment, you do have the option, if you're publishing in these subscription journals, to share a copy of your paper publicly. So you also have the option to publish in one of these journals, but send money to the publisher to make that particular article, open access. So whilst it's mostly a subscription journal, you can specifically pay them to make that particular article open access. So you'll see these journals which have a mixture of closed and open access. And this is an option for nearly all subscription journals now, but you have to pay a fee, and those fees tend to be very high. And this is mostly prestigious journals or high impact journals that offer this service. This is called hybrid open access. But, and you're probably aware of this, if you're asked to pay a fee, you may be eligible to get a discount or a complete waiver on this. Now, this is what I mentioned a minute ago, which we're calling green open access. So you publish in a subscription journal, but you take a version of your paper. It's not always the final paper. It's not the branded paper. It's the final. It's the version of the paper that's been submitted, that's gone through peer review, and you put it in a repository. You put it in your university's repository. You put it on your website. You put it on ResearchGate, and you're allowed to do that. But there might be what's called an embargo period of 6 months to a year before you're allowed to do that. So this is completely free to you as an author. So as you can see, you can publish in a subscription journal, but there are options for you to make it open to everyone else. Some of those options mean paying, some of those options are free, but there's a bit of a delay. And if anyone's got experience of this, do let us know in the chat, because sometimes it can be quite confusing to follow this, and it's always good to hear examples. So then you have what's called gold open access. These are specific open access journals, and they're all the articles in the journal are completely open to read. As a reader, you can read everything, but as the author, you have to pay to publish your paper in these journals, and the money required is quite high. There's an estimate that I used here, which is about $2,500 US, which has probably gone up by now because this was a couple of years ago. Can you hear me? I just got a message in the chat that you can't hear me.
We can.
Yes,
I think it
we
might
can.
be
Yes,
Okay.
you
Yeah.
can hear me.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Right. So
Yes, we can hear you.
thank you, Ali. So this is gold open access journals, and then again, if you're in a low or middle income country, you may be able to get a discount or complete waiver of that cost, and we'll talk about that again in a moment. Then you have something called, which you might have heard, called diamond open access. What this means is you're publishing in a free open access journal. All of the articles in the journal are completely free to read, and as an author, you also don't have to pay anything. And these are still good quality journals. There's no evidence to suggest that publishing for free means poor quality, not at all. And there are thousands of examples of this on the directory of open access journals, which I'll mention again in a short while. So there are lots of different options here. So don't just assume that you have to pay to publish your paper. There are different options. Sometimes for people in some fields or at some universities, you have to publish in very particular journals, you have to make them open access. So it's not always easy to have all these choices. But for most researchers, I think there are choices for you to consider. So understanding open access is important just to get a grasp of your different options. You don't have to remember these names and these colors, but just remember that you do have options. So this is the next section, and I'm calling it only pay to publish if you really need to. So I'm just the main purpose of this is to prevent you from paying to publish, and this is the problem of predatory journals. They charge you a fee for a very poor publishing service. So if you can get away with paying in the first place, then you've avoided them. So if you do have to pay a fee, if your university require you to publish in a particular high-ranking journal, this is quite often the case in the health sciences, I think, you have to publish in certain journals. They have to be immediately open access. And so you will be quoted an article processing charge, or an APC. But often there may be the opportunity to get a discount if you're a low and middle income country. There's something called the Henari list, which is based on World Health Organization rankings. And quite often this can be frustrating for some countries in Africa, which have reached middle income status. And so you don't quite get the full waiver. It's always worth asking the journal about this. Sometimes some universities have a special deal with the publishers, which you might not be aware of. So it's worth speaking to your librarian about this, just in case. Sometimes if you're doing research for a particular funder, they will pay this APC for you. Thank you for Kylie's just put the link to the Henari list in the chat. Thank you very much. So hopefully there should be options for many of you if you have to pay APCs. And what should you expect for these charges? You should, if you're paying a journal to publish your paper, especially if you're paying like hundreds or thousands of US dollars, that journal should have a good reputation. It should be well known. It should have a wide readership, hopefully an international readership. It should conduct rigorous peer review so that the quality of your research has been improved as you've gone through the peer review process. There should be good publishing quality and digital infrastructure behind that journal. It's not just some website that somebody in their bedroom has created and put some PDFs on. If that website goes down, there should be a permanent record behind it and archiving behind it. And I will mention this in more detail in a moment, it should be indexed in a reputable journal indexing service. And this can be really useful as a reference point. Now, remember, there are many great journals out there that do all of this for free for you. So it isn't necessarily something that this needs to be paid for, but if you do need to pay, you should be getting all these things. You should be getting a top quality service. So if you're quoted an APC for something and you're thinking, I'm not really sure about this journal, then it probably is too good to be true. Right, we're going back to Menti again to see what you think. Now, I know we have some experienced researchers in our group. So hopefully if you're able to navigate to the next question, I see at least one person has. I want you to tell me what you think is a good way of avoiding these predatory journals. Now, I know we haven't gone into great depth about what a predatory journal is yet, but how do you think you can avoid bad journals? So one person says checking the editor, and that can be really useful because sometimes in your field you may recognize the sort of famous researchers in your field, the well-known scholars in your field, and you recognize them either as the editor or members of the editorial board, the people that are listed on the journal website. So it's good to check who the editor is. Learn to spot them early in the publication process. So yeah, maybe it's great to kind of get a grasp of this early when you're writing. If you're doing it right at the end and you're in a hurry, then it can be a challenge. But yeah, learn to spot them early. Check their APC. So find out the information on their website about how much they charge, and hopefully that should be transparent. Oh yeah, so use a journal that's sponsored by a credible organization. I think this is really important too. So who is publishing this journal? Is it a famous publisher? Is it a learned organization or scholarly society? Is it a university? Are they credible? Also, Google the editors as well. Google the editor and check to see if the journal is mentioned on their profile. That's always quite a good thing to do. Check the indexing status. Yes, and we'll be looking at this in more detail. Indexes can be a really useful reference point. Check peer review turnaround time. Yeah, so this can be useful to ascertain whether they are putting speed over quality. If they are promising to publish your paper in 7 days, then be very, very wary. It can take, unfortunately, it can often take months and months to get your research paper published. In the chat, Josephine says checks indexing status, impact factor, which we'll look at again in a moment. Sia says ask my librarian for a list of approved journals for the university. That can be, so there's 2 really important things there. Ask your librarian because they know loads about this kind of stuff. And then if your university has a list of approved journals, that's an excellent reference point. Check, going back to the Menti, check where better researchers in your field publish and where good papers come from. Absolutely. So who are your peers and who are your some of the best researchers that you know? Where are they publishing? What kind of journals? Look at the journals they publish in, look at their reference list to see the other journals that they cite. Check the indexing status and impact factor, check their editorial policy. I just think in general it's good to read the websites. Look at what they're saying about their, and look at the instructions for authors page, how they approach publishing. Ask my librarian again. Yeah, excellent. Oops. Okay. Looks like have I switched to the next slide? I think I have accidentally. Let's go on to the next question. Excellent. Very good tips. Excellent tips. Now, the next one, just wanted to ask you. I'll let some more answers come through first. So the question here is, what sorts of journals are you told to publish in for career advancement? So as it's already been mentioned by Sia, often your journal might have an approved journals list, but sometimes the advice is a little bit more vague, such as publishing a Scopus index journal. So a specific index that your university want you to publish in journals that are in that index. So I'll let a couple more come through. Our first answer is Scopus, and we will talk about Scopus in a moment. And then so Blanche, what you said there is interesting. So where do you find, this is a tip, where do you find a journal's impact factor if it's not displayed on their website? So it's very useful if a journal says they have an impact factor, then you need to double check that, and we'll have a go at that later. Right, Q1 journals. So Q1 journals is part of Scopus, I believe. It's a particular type of Scopus journals. So you have like Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. So this person needs to publish in a particular subset, the sort of the top tier, I think it is, of Scopus journals. And another one here is PubMed index journal. So this is probably for medical journals. The journal has to be indexed in PubMed. No specific advice is given. Yeah, sometimes your universities don't give you any advice on this. And another one here, so particular publishers are recommended. So Wiley, Elsevier, Science Direct. So universities might direct you to particular publishers and particular websites. Mostly Elsevier, Springer, and Wiley journals. Yeah, it can be useful to use that as a reference point. I mean, sometimes I think the argument is that sometimes this means you don't get the diversity of journals which are kind of useful for researchers in Africa and Asia to have. So you don't get many African journals, for example, in Wiley and Elsevier. But usually these publishers are a good kind of a good indicator of quality. And yeah, somebody, and Hasir in the chat says Q2 to Q3 journals that are specifically to my field of research, and that is important as well. Often you'll need to look at journals that are focused on your research topic, not just broad interdisciplinary journals. And then finally, somebody says Elsevier, specifically Elsevier journals. Okay, brilliant, thank you. And I think I've got one more question before going on to the next slide. Right. Frontiers in plant science. That's a very specific answer, Moira. So next one. So this is I think this is our final Menti slide. So we've got 25 of you in the Menti now, and I know we've got some experienced people. What are your tips for finding a good journal? What are your tips for finding a suitable journal? And so some similar points first there. Look at the editor. So if you recognize that editor or somebody on the editorial board, and you can sort of double check that they are involved in that journal, that should hopefully mean that it's a good quality journal. I mean, there are cases where researchers are approached by slightly unscrupulous and predatory journals to join their editorial board. But on the whole, if it's a good editor, it should be a good journal. Tips for finding a suitable journal: the scope of the journal can be really important, because I mean, most journal publishing is quite niche. Most journals are quite niche to a particular field, or even a really super specific field. And so the scope of the journal is important. The transparency of the editorial process, excellent, yes. Journal finders, so many of the big publishers now have a journal finder tool on their website, where you can either browse through the different journals, or you can put a short summary of your research, and it will look up the right journal for you, mostly usually within that publishing that particular publisher, but there are some useful tools out there. Check the number of citations. That's an interesting one as well, and I think that's kind of related to the impact factor. The editor. Target journals that publish the direction-given publications in your field. So journals that have got that are well known in your field. Yeah, absolutely. Through consulting experts in my field. Yeah, so ask the senior researchers in your field where they published. Excellent. So this is all good advice. So I mean, you've done half of my job for me here already. Right. And this leads on quite nicely to the importance of knowing the journals in your field. So hopefully, as a researcher, you would have done some literature review work. You would have looked through other people's reference lists. You would have gone to Google Scholar and see who cited who, and things like that. So it's really important to know which the good journals are in your particular area of expertise. It solves all these problems for you, because you know exactly where you need to go to when looking to publish your research paper. So, but before I get to that, I wanted to mention something about blacklists. So there are some lists out there of predatory journals. There was a very famous one called Beale's List, which was discontinued because they were sued by a publisher. But it was been carried on by an anonymous source. Similarly, there's a website called predatoryjournals.org. So these are free websites. They can be useful, but they are not always up to date, and we don't know who is updating these websites. So can be useful reference point. Sort of for a quick answer if you're really unsure whether something is a predatory journal, but it's not always accurate. But it is a good way of kind of, if you browse through, you can get an idea of what a bad journal looks like. There's a paid version, a very professional paid version of this called Predatory Reports by Cabell's. I think it's quite expensive though. on the whole, I'm not really a big fan of blacklist because there are so many of these sort of bad and predatory journals out there that it's impossible to keep up with naming them all. I think a better approach is to use journal indexes, which a few of you have mentioned, and we're going to list them all in a moment. We're going to come to them in a moment. So going back to that previous point about knowing the journals in your field, read reference lists. Go and find a really well written, well cited, famous paper, hopefully a recent one, and look down a reference list. Spot the journal names in there. If it's in your field, those might be the kind of journals that you're going to need to look up and familiarize yourself with. So, journal indexes. So these can be really, really useful. Now, there are good journals out there which aren't necessarily in these indexes, but on the whole, these are a very good indicator of quality in publishing. Not necessarily the quality of the research, because that's down to individual researchers and peer reviewers, but these can guarantee a reasonable level of quality in publishing practices. And there may have been a few cases in the past. Somebody mentioned, I think in the last session I've done this, that a predatory journal was found in Scopus. But on the whole, these are very good sources of good quality journals. So you may have heard of the Web of Science. Sometimes it's also called the Science Citation Index. And this is a collection of a reasonably small number of journals globally. And so it's very selective. They have a very strict process to accept journals. And so, I mean, unfortunately, there aren't many kind of African or Asian or Latin American journals on this. It's quite American, European, but it is a very good indicator of quality. And this is where the impact factor comes from. So you've heard of the impact factor. Not all journals have impact factor. Not all good journals have an impact factor, but the top level, most prestigious journals, most cited journals do have an impact factor, and you can only have an impact factor if you are a journal can only have an impact factor if it is indexed in the Web of Science. Next on the list, you've got Scopus. Scopus is a slightly broader, slightly more geographically diverse database of journals. It's still a good indicator of quality, and you can check the sources. We'll have a go with this later to see what we can check a few journals in there. But Scopus is also good. PubMed is specific to medical journals, and I think that was mentioned in the Menti earlier. So if you're looking to publish in a medical journal, look in PubMed. But also the best quality medical journals are indexed in Medline, which is a certain subsection of PubMed. And then you've got the Directory of Open Access Journals. And this is a much more diverse database of journals, much more geographically diverse. And this is just for purely open access journals. And the great thing about this website is you can filter by the open access journals that charge a fee and the open access journals which are free. It's a really good tool if you really want to avoid publication charges but want to publish open access. I've also included African Journals Online, of course, which is an excellent source of, I think I've got over 800 African journals now. I don't know if it's risen since I did this presentation last, but it is a great source of African journals. It's got this excellent star system called JPPS of 1, 2, and 3-star journals. Any journal with one of those stars on is excellent. And yeah, so I also recommend African Journals Online. Now, you may be asking, and I put this at the bottom, what about Google Scholar? I mean, so Google Scholar is a really good source of research papers, but it doesn't have any publishing quality process or vetting process. So unfortunately, there will be predatory journals in Google Scholar. It crawls the web and it registers absolutely everything out there. So there's both good and bad in Google Scholar. Still an excellent tool though, but not a place to sort of vouch for the quality of a particular journal. So those are the indexes. Those are the main indexes. Are an excellent reference point for you to check. I'll briefly mention the impact factor. The impact factor is a number that you get for a journal that's calculated according to the number of citations that journal has received over the previous 2 years. So if the papers in that journal have got lots of references and citations from elsewhere, the impact factor will go up. Important to note, not all journals have an impact factor at all. So it's not necessarily intended to assess the quality of the journal, but it does show that there are articles in that journal that have been cited a lot, and so that journal has a very broad audience. And again, it has to be indexed in the Clarivate Web of Science to actually get the impact factor in the first place. And this is important for if you come across a website which says the journal has an impact factor and it's not indexed in here, then that journal is not being truthful. And that's already a red flag. And there's also fake impact factors, which people have just made up. So what we do is we check the Clarivate website, we check the master journal list just to double check that, because there are lots of fake ones out there. So 2 important points at the bottom there. But many journals don't have an impact factor at all. I forgot about this slide. So comparing what journals say about their impact factor and indexing. So what you will see on a lot of predatory journals and really bad quality journals, they might have a certificate of indexing or certificate of impact factor. And that's usually not what reputable journals do. They don't show certificates on their journal websites. That's not generally how it's done, not best practice. You'll also see lots of colorful logos on many of them, many of which aren't actually reputable indexes. And this example here has got DOAJ on it, but the rest of them, like ResearchGate and Google Scholar, they're not indexes which show that the journal has been vetted. What you really want is to be able to go onto an index such as the Web of Science and see that there's a record there on their website, on the database. That's how you check that the journal is telling the truth, not all these logos and certificates. Okay. Now, I wanted to make the point also that when we're talking about good journals and predatory journals, it's not a black or white, not a dichotomy. There's a lot of grey area. There's a lot in between. So on the left here, I'm showing you've got there are journals that are definitely bad. They're definitely fake or predatory. They're charging you money for doing very little. You've also got really bad journals which got poor publishing practices, but they're not charging you anything. They're just not very good journals, or they might be really new and they haven't got set up properly yet. But they're not predatory. They're not. We won't call them predatory. They're just not very good. Then you've got I've got on the other side this red line here, just journals which are quite low quality practices, but they don't charge a fee. Now, quite often researchers come to me and share a website of a journal and say, is this a predatory journal? I look at it and it's not very good. They're not charging anything for the practice. So they're not trying to exploit you as a researcher. They're not trying to get your money for nothing. It's free. They're just not, it's not a great website. And then there's what I've put on, sort of going more into the green area. Sometimes you get quite niche journals, get some really niche journals that are launched by a society or a university or regional journals. Their website might lack a bit of information. It might sort of be missing some information or a particular thing, which means it's not one of the best journals, but they're still peer reviewed. They're still reputable. They're run by scholars. So they're still might be a very good journal to publish in. And then on the right-hand side, what I'm calling good journals, they're indexed, they've got transparent practices, they've got good information on their websites. You can recognize the editorial board members. This is most journals, I'd say. And then at the top on the far right, you've got your really high impact and international journals. You've got your Science and your Nature, and the top journals in your particular field. So there is a scale here, and it's not always clear if you find a particular journal where that journal fits on this scale. So just be aware of that. Sometimes there's a lot of grey area. The spectrum, as I've called it. It's really important to read the website. Don't just look at an email. Get an email comes in, you just follow the link and you start talking to them about their publishing practices. You want to look on their website, because this is where they put all the important information. This is their how they sell their service. So critically examine their website. Does it carry out rigorous peer review? Does it charge a fee? Is it transparent about charging a fee? Is that fee justified? Is it indexed in a reputable database? How does the journal talk about itself? Sometimes you read the about page and it doesn't actually sound like the journal knows the field very well, and that's usually a red flag. Sometimes it's AI generated, or they've copied and pasted something from Wikipedia. Does the editorial board look legitimate? Does the publisher look credible? And both of these things have been mentioned in the Menti already. Who is this publisher? Do they look credible? Have you heard of them? Are they a university? Are they like Elsevier? They look credible to you. Have you never heard of them? More quick tips. Quick tips: don't trust email invites unless you recognize the sender. Be skeptical of international journals. Double check indexing claims. Read the aims and scope and about page. Check who the publisher is. Check your reference list. This is from an article I wrote on the Rising Scholars website, and I'll mention this again in a short while. Very, very quickly, because this was mentioned in our last session, which we did in December about this. There are other related unethical practices, which people are quite interested in. There's something called predatory conferences. These are very low quality conferences which are set up that are not run by scholars or learned societies. They're just random meetings of people within sort of broad disciplinary areas. One other sort of big hot topic is paying for authorship. So buying an authorship position on a paper, and I've got a screenshot to share you on that in a minute. This was mentioned last time as well. Other things such as gift authorship, giving somebody authorship on your paper even though they haven't done anything, or the opposite, not mentioning somebody in the authors list even though they've played a part in the paper. There's fake peer review going around, sort of getting recommending for your friends to do peer review, sort of sharing that with your sort of peers and colleagues. That I haven't really mentioned AI much yet, but there's a lot of misuse of AI out there. We could spend a whole session on that. To write the paper for you, for generating images, image manipulation, fake images, but without any actual human input. And there's something, citation manipulation as well. So there's lots of things happening out there. We don't have time to go into all of those, but I'm aware that they are happening. There's two things I found today. The first one I found on Facebook. So somebody offering opportunities. There's slots open for these 12 papers which have been drafted. So WhatsApp me if you want to be part of these papers. And if you WhatsApp, you'll probably find that they want you to pay for the privilege of being an author on their paper. And then on the right-hand side, I saw this this image on the internet recently. So offering authorship slots as part of the paper which is going to be submitted to a journal. So there are lots of very unscrupulous activities going on that are similar to predatory publishing as well. So be very aware of these things, because it may look appealing as a cheap way to get published, but there's also a very high chance that if you do this, you'll be found out. So yeah, be aware of the things that are happening. I saw a shocked face pop up on the screen there. So this was mentioned in the Q&A last time, and so I had to go and find these examples. very, very briefly, you might be asking, what about book publishing? Book publishing is something slightly different, but with similar kind of principles. Again, there's kind of the more traditional publishing route. So if for publishing a book, it can be really difficult to actually get the interest of a publisher to publish your book. So they select the book, they select the authors, maybe you'll pitch an idea to them, but these are quite traditional publishers. And sometimes university presses, they organize it, they organize the peer review, they produce it, they distribute it for you, and then you receive either an advance payment if you're lucky, or you get royalties later. That's how the traditional publishing, book publishing system works. There's book chapters as well. So again, this is slightly different in you're only featuring in a chapter of a book. So the publisher selects the editors, and they commission or select chapters from particular authors. They organize the peer review. Generally speaking, there's not much money in this because there are so many authors in a book. Maybe the editors receive some royalties. And then you've got self-publishing. So self-publishing is very, it's become more and more popular these days. And you have to be careful with this because there's also something which is kind of, again, this sort of predatory space. I've heard them called vanity publishers. There are companies that will charge the author's fee to publish a book for you. And you probably won't make much money out of it. And there are more reliable self-publishing platforms out there. There's one through Amazon, for example. There are a few reliable ones, but it can be difficult to tell who's who in the market. But yeah, so again, similar kind of principles. Really do your research on who's in the market to help you get published. So I'm aware that I have used almost a full hour talk. I will I also want to quickly mention Rising Scholars, who I was previously part of. Have also got some great great resources on this topic. Now, I do believe we do have the potential for another half an hour. And what I wanted to do was to open up to Q&A. Also, if we have time, I'd like to share with you on screen some examples of journals that we can look at and sort of compare reputable and less reputable journals. Thank you. Kylie's just put the link to Rising Scholars in the chat. Kylie, I'm sorry for talking for so long.
Not a problem at all. That was amazing. We can go on to Q&A, or if you'd like to go on to the journals. We've got 2 questions so far. If you do you want to come back, or I'm not sure what you would like.
Okay, yeah, we can give people some time to come up with questions, some more questions. So what
Awesome.
what I'll do then is I'll start showing you some examples.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Right, so I'm just going to briefly stop presenting to switch to a different screen. I can. Right, so let's move. Right, let's share my screen again. Screen 2. Right. So, International Journal of International Journal of. Right, so I wanted to share some examples for you. I've got 5 journals in my browser here at the moment. So here's our first example, and I'm hearing some background noise at the moment.
Sorry, can everybody other than Andy please mute themselves? Thank you. Tolu Akin Fagole. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So this is the first example. I'm hoping you can see this. Let me know if you can't see it. This is the International Journal of Environmental Analytical Chemistry. I wanted to give a good example first. This is a Taylor and Francis journal. So this is one of my previous employers. So let's look at this journal in general. Actually, I can go back to the homepage for this. So it's just checking I'm not a robot, which is probably wise. Okay, thank you for checking that, TNF. Right, this is the International Journal of Environmental Analytical Chemistry. So this, first of all, what we see on this, it says Open Select. I'll zoom in a bit at the top. What does Open Select mean? It means this is a hybrid journal. Now, what this means is that it's generally closed access, it's generally subscription, but if you are publishing in this journal, you have the option of paying to make your article open access. So you'll see that if we read the full, if you scroll down, we can read about the journal. You'll see it says it's got an impact factor. It shows you the speed of publishing in it, which is generally quite a long time. It also shows it's got 14% acceptance rate. So 14% of papers actually make it through to publication. So it's quite challenging to get published. You've got your editorial board, and it tells you about open access. So what it says is that if you choose to publish open access in this journal, you may be asked to pay an article processing charge. So if you choose not to publish open access, there is no APC. So you see, you have a choice here. You can publish for free, but only people with a subscription will be able to see your paper, or you can pay an APC, and they're recommending you publish open access because you have a broader readership, but it costs you as an author. So that is our first example of a good journal. Now, the thing about this is it says it's got an impact factor. In fact, I think if I scroll right to the bottom, it will tell us, if I go to the abstracting and indexing section, it will tell you where it's indexed. So it says here, Science Citation Index, which is the Web of Science. It's got different names, and Scopus. So this is where it's indexed, and it says it's got an impact factor. Now, let's copy the name of this journal, because we're now going to go to the Clarivate Master Journal list, and we're going to double check if this journal's claims are actually true. We're going to put the name in here and go search journals, and we'll see what Clarivate say about all this. And there we go. Exact match found. This journal is indexed in the Web of Science, so it will have, it's based just around the corner from me. It will have an impact factor. Now, it doesn't say the impact factor on this. Unfortunately, you often have to have a commercial account to see what the impact factor is, but this is definitely indexed in a very credible source. So we can vouch for this journal. All the signs are good. Right. Let's go to a less reputable journal. Now, this journal is called the International Journal of Development Research. So it's a very broad title. It calls itself an international journal. And so we should be especially skeptical for a journal which says it's an international journal, of course. It says it has an impact factor. So we need to check that. So if I click on the impact factors section here, again, so this is a bad example. We don't really go with certificates. That doesn't really prove anything. There's a section here which says indexing on the right hand side. So it's indexed in, it says, well, Google Scholar, ResearchGate, Academia Edu. None of these are reputable indexes. Okay. And yes, it says it has an impact factor. Now, I can't remember whether you can find the cost on here, but there is a cost of publishing in this journal because I've checked before. So what we can do, so what we can see here, let's find the ISSN. That's too hard to find. International Journal of Development Research. Let's see if we can find it. It says it's got an impact factor. Let's see if it's in the Web of Science. Is it in the Web of Science? It's come up with 22,000 results. There's no exact match for that. So if I put it in speech marks, I think it should be more. Yeah. So if I'm more specific and put it in speech marks, No results. So this is not in the Web of Science, but it says it has an impact factor. So it's being dishonest. And I think in general, you'd probably say that this isn't a very reputable looking journal webpage. It's got a PayPal Pay Now link as well. So that is what we would probably call a predatory journal, because it's being dishonest. And it's charging you a fee for not a very good publishing practice. Right, let's look at a different example. So this is the Journal of Biomedical and Pharmaceutical Sciences. So that's, first of all, if I go to if I can find the home page, this one. Right, so it's, first of all, we see it says it's got an impact factor. It does give an indication of time, which is reasonably long, which is interesting. So I know that this is a very dodgy journal, but it's trying to be, it's trying to sound like a real journal. It's got the name of the editor-in-chief, which we can check. Now, how much does it cost? Let's go to the instructions for authors and see what it tells us about how we get published in this journal. So we have charges. $1,400 US. $1,400 US. So we should expect a good service for this. Now, for that reason, this is why I usually look at the indexing section. It says it's got an impact factor, so this should be indexed in the Web of Science according to that, but it says indexed in Google Scholar, Publons doesn't exist anymore, and something called Europub. So there's something already quite dishonest about that. It shouldn't be charging a fee for something which isn't indexed. It's claiming an impact factor. Now for this one, I can double check I think the ISSN, it's a more specific way of searching for a journal. So no sources found. So it's not in the master journal list. So this is a dishonest journal. And again, you kind of have to think, even if you're unsure about this journal, even if you didn't see that dishonesty there, why would you pay $1,400 for something which isn't published in one of the main indexes? So there's something to, unless you're really familiar with this journal, unless you know Dr. Emmanuel, your senior colleagues have published in this journal, they know it's good. You still have to kind of worry about that cost and what you're getting for that cost. I'll just close that down. Okay. Another journal, Crime Science. So this journal publishing can be very niche, and crime science is a very niche topic. This is an interdisciplinary journal based around understanding of crime and disorder, and using psychology, environmental criminology, and things like that. So it's very niche. So it says it's open access. What else does it say? It's got an impact factor, it says, which is interesting to know. We can see who the editor-in-chief is. What else can we find out about this journal? Abstracted and indexed in Directory of Open Access Journals, Scopus, and this thing here called Emerging Sources Citation Index. That's the Web of Science as well. So it's indexed in 3 of our main indexes. But let's double check that, shall we? Crime Science. So there are 2 places, or a couple of places we can check for this. This is the Directory of Open Access Journals. I'm going to go back to the beginning. This is the Directory of Open Access Journals. So as I said, this is a really good place to search for journals without fees, because you can just tick the box and it will filter for you all the journals that are open access and don't charge you a fee. That's really good. Now I'm going to search for Crime Science. So Crime Science said it is an open access journal. It said it is indexed in DOAJ, and hopefully there it is there. So there's a few journals that have got crime and science in their name, but this is our one here. It says Crime Science, published in the UK by BMC. So BMC is part of Springer, so I can cross-reference that. And yeah, it's indexed here. It tells us what the APCs are. Actually, $1,890 US, so it's quite expensive. But we can see it's indexed. It also says that it also says that it's indexed in Scopus, and we can check that as well. Hopefully Scopus is working for me today. Let's go for this is Scopus sources. It's free to check. We put in here crime science. Hopefully this will come up, fingers crossed, that there is a journal in Scopus called Crime Science. Yes, there is. Crime Science, open access. So we can trust crime science, which is great. And then I've just accidentally closed an important, recently closed tabs. There we go. Right. So Agile, an Agile journal, can we trust it? That's the big question. So this is so Agile have very kindly shown that this is open access. It's the African Journal of Applied Research. It's open access. See this logo up here, it means diamond open access. So there shouldn't be any, I think there shouldn't be any fees for this journal. And it's got 2 stars in the Agile system. So it's a very good journal. It's very difficult to get to 3 stars. So this is the African Journal of Applied Research. Now, let's see if it's in the directory of open access journals. We already trust this journal because it's an Agile, but let's just see if it's in DRAJ as well. So I'm just waiting for that to load. So what we know is this is owned by the African Applied Researchers Association, a non-profit, and I believe that's in Ghana. I read that earlier. So sometimes it's really important to see who actually publishes it. African Journal of Applied Research. There we go. Found it in DRAJ really easily. It's in Ghana. No APC. So open access. No charge to publish. Excellent. And then finally, I was alerted to this journal this morning, and what is interesting about this one, it's called the Journal of Community Service and Society Empowerment. So I saw it on Facebook and has some very colourful sort of logos and things on Facebook, and these kind of mock-ups of what it looks like on. This is the paper version. This is the version on the Kindle, and I thought it'd be really. So this is a really interesting example because. When you look at this, you look at the abstracting indexing. So it's not published in any reputable indexes. All it's got is Google Scholar. However, on their homepage, it mentions Scopus, and that's a little bit dishonest. I'm not sure what that's about. I think they might have got a bit confused there. But let's see how much it costs about the journal. Let's see how much it costs to publish in this journal. So this is an Indonesian journal, okay? If we can find, I did find this earlier. Sometimes you have to really kind of search and see. Author fees, there we go. It was there all along. So author fees is actually pretty much free. Pretty much a free journal to publish in. So whilst this might look like quite an unscrupulous journal, and there are some slightly problematic things about it, I think what this is, it's just quite a small journal based in Indonesia. And I think I did have a quick look at their current issue, and it's a lot of those authors have names which are sort of Southeast Asian or Indonesian. So it's a small journal. It's quite new. Its publishing practices aren't brilliant, but it doesn't charge a fee. So I'd put that in the kind of the grey area of, if you wanted to publish in this journal, if you're Indonesian, if this is your specific expertise, then be careful. But I wouldn't call this a predatory journal. So you do have these sort of in the middle. You have some journals which are so obviously bad, and they're charging you way too much money for that bad publishing practice, and we call them predatory. You got some in the middle which just aren't very great. So and you got some which are obviously good. So those are some examples of journals. But it's always nice to have these reference points. So the master journal is Scopus, Director of Open Access Journals, and it's always good to bear in mind local and African journals as well. There are ways that we can vouch for their credibility because of African journals online. So some useful reference point for you. I hope that's useful just to look through some example journals. I'm going to stop talking for a while now and see what questions you've got.
I'm afraid you're about to continue talking. We have 5 questions. Beginning with the first one from Blanche Pretorius. Where would you, this may have been answered, where do you find a journal's impact factor if it's not on their website?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, because if it's not on their website, it's very difficult to find it without a login to the Clarivate. So it's very difficult to find it. Normally what a journal would do is they will tell you their impact factor because they'll be very proud of it. And so that's your reference point. If they don't talk about it, which is unusual, then it is actually hard to find the actual number and vouch for it without actually having a commercial login to Clarivate. But you can still go onto that master journal list, and you can still check for free, at least to see if that journal is indexed in the place where they would get an impact factor.
Right.
I hope that answered the question.
No, thank you. That was super interesting, because it is a good question. Why can't we see it if you have one? Next question from Ikechugo Igbokwe. What do you do if you mistakenly publish in a low quality journal?
Oh, good question. Now, I believe there was some guidance on this on the Committee on Publication Ethics website, COPE. There's some case studies around this. It's complicated. It really does depend on the journal you found yourself in. If it's a obvious predatory journal, they might not respond to you. They might not need to. They're in probably in a different country. They can just ignore you. But you probably have certain rights. If you give them money, you may not get that back. You still have certain rights as the copyright holder to go through the process of withdrawing that from them. So check what you have signed. Have you signed away the copyright to that journal, or have you given them a license to publish? Because that might be quite important to see whether you can use that research again. So you can write to them and ask to withdraw that paper. And you might have justification to do that depending on whether they've been dishonest in advertising their services. But again, that might, in terms of legality, that might depend on their jurisdiction and where they are. But you're certainly within your rights to contact them and ask to withdraw if they've been dishonest. But it really does depend on the journal. So I don't know if we can find the Committee on Publication Ethics websites and share the link to that, because there is some good advice on there. In fact, I found it, publicationethics.org. I hope that's...
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
That was going to be the next thing I did. Can we move on to the next question?
Yeah, certainly.
Awesome.
Well,
From Mbusa Wasukundi, what is your opinion of MDPI journals?
That's a very good question. And so this is a tricky one because there are some debates about this. So MDPI, they've been going for many years. I've actually published in an MDPI journal. I've published a paper in one of their journals. And there are many critics of their approach. So they're very well known. They've got some very good journals. So I think a lot of the criticism is about specific journals. Historically, they published some really good stuff, some great journals, some great papers. There are criticisms, particularly of certain journals, because of the speed of publication and the fact that they would spam authors quite a lot. And I think there's a criticism of they have lots of special issues. And I think it's really difficult to say. If you called them, I wouldn't call them a predatory journal. I would I would take things on a journal by journal basis and ask your colleagues their experience of publishing. If there's a particular MDPI journal which comes up, just ask somebody that's published in that journal. So that's I'm trying to be diplomatic there. I know that there have been lots of criticisms of that particular publisher.
Moving on to a slightly sticky question as well. What criteria do the Q1 and Q2 journals look at before accepting a paper, specifically in social sciences?
I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer that very well because I don't have much experience of publishing in Scopus Q1 and Q2 journals. I would imagine, though, that a publication on that sort of tier might be looking more at novelty, more on international interest of that paper, and obviously a very rigorous quality of research. But unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experience that I'd be able to tell you about that particular kind of way that the journals are tiered within Scopus. But I'd imagine the threshold of quality is quite high.
Thank you very much. The last question, I think I will take. Sorry, I'm pinching the last one from you. From Dr. Gujral from Nepal, I believe. Why does the JPPS framework not display the status of journals based on the JOL? If you are referring to NEP-JOL, I'm afraid I do not know. The JOLs are all, although they have similar names, they're all run separately from one another. A JOL does display the JPPS rating of each journal on its website, except in cases where, for example, we haven't put it on yet in the case of journals very recently added to the website. But in the case of NEP-JOL, I actually don't know, and I suggest that you contact NEP-JOL themselves. They will hopefully have a better answer for you, because as far as I know, according to AJOL's protocols, we do display the rating. We do not display whether something is predatory or not, the understanding being that nothing on our website is predatory, although we encourage people, should they find somebody predatory, please to tell us that we can investigate. Thank you. Let me just see. I think we may have okay. We have some discussion happening about MDPI in the chat, which I think I'm not sure if we really want to get into that now, as we are approaching 4:30. So I will just ask, are there any final questions for Andy? Oh, I have one, if there are no others.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. What do you do if your journal is on a blacklist? For example, if you have ended up on Beals but you are not predatory, what do you do?
Oh wow, that's a tricky one, because that Beals list, I mean, that was I think the reason that list got the initial version of Beals list got discontinued, I think, was because somebody took legal action against the author. And perhaps I know that he I think, am I right in saying that he actually listed MDPI or Frontiers or particular publisher on there and then had to retract that? So it's very difficult because we don't know who the authors are of those latest lists. And so I would imagine the answer would be to contact that website and lobby them to get it removed. I'm not a big fan of blacklists myself. What do you think, Kylie? Do you have any thoughts about how we can do that?
Well, the reason I asked is because occasionally we come across somebody that has applied to AJOL for their journal to be an indexing partner of ours, and they come up as blacklisted, but we can't find anything blacklistable about them. Yeah. And then we go back and check, and they will be like, well, when we started, we spoke to Beal, and he said, because what I have heard, I can't verify this myself, so I have heard this, is that he was not particularly in favor of Diamond Open Access or open access publishing, as he believed that it would lead to problems. So there is a historical issue there. And yeah, so I actually am never entirely certain. My advice is generally the same: lobby them to take you off, prove that you're not predatory. But it is occasionally an uphill battle, particularly if you're coming from the global south.
Yes.
Yeah, so
yes, absolutely.
It's an ongoing thing, and if anybody has any ideas, I would be delighted to hear them, because this is some legitimate journals do have this problem. And as editors, I think it is possibly one of the things you really don't want to run into is finding yourself blacklisted when you haven't, when you're a perfectly legitimate journal. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know I do remember that there were a suite of African journals that Beale included on his list back in the day,
Yes.
like 10 years ago,
Yeah.
because they didn't kind of reach his quality criteria, his particular personal quality criteria, and there's still there's a kind of historical thing going on there that it's very difficult to kind of go back and sort of remove that sort of reputation based on this one person making this judgment on your publishing. So it's terrible. And he was quite biased against Global South Publishing as well. So
Yes. Yeah, I have seen as one moves through the publishing world, one hears bits of the story from here and there.
Yeah.
Anyway, it is a fraught and evolving field, and we thank you so much for coming in and shining a light on part of it for us. That was amazing. Thank you very, very much. And thank you to all of our attendees who have been stellar. This will be posted on our YouTube channel, and if any luck, I think we will also distribute the slides, if we may, Andy. That would be awesome. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for coming back. We will definitely see you again. Almost certainly I will be in touch. And for everybody attending today, please feel free to join us for our next webinar, which is on the 28th of May. Keep an eye on our social media for exact time, and that will be on ranking or not ranking, as the case may be. Right. Thank you very, very much, Andy. Thank you very, very much, attendees. I'm going to stop recording now.